Assalamu alaikum rahmatullahi ta'ala wa barakatuh. Welcome to Islamic Action TV, Guerrilla Minded Productions. Myself, Bilal Ali Hugh, coming to drop a little short something on you today. Recently, in the media, there was an expose, you could say, or not even an expose, but like an expose on the community. But it was brought on the back of this documentary, this idea of the ex-Muslim, the ex-Muslim community that's forming, and they've created something like was an ex-Muslim support group. It's the most insane, it's the most bizarre, it's the most farcical idea of a community, because it's like people are struggling with the idea. What I got from it is like there's these young kids born into Muslim families. They don't want to be Muslims no more. They're going through some kind of identity crisis. They've got some kind of psychological issues with their family. They don't want to be members of the club no more. They don't want to be card-carrying members of the club anymore. But they're pouting and they're sulking because they want to leave the club but still have the benefits. They still want to be accepted by the community. They want to almost like they want to deny the Quran or desecrate the Quran or disrespect the Quran, disregard the Quran and the word of Allah and Allah's messenger. They don't believe in the creed no more. Fine, that's their choice. Allah knows best. He's the judge, right? But they want to do that. But at the same time, they must be loved, accepted, nurtured, suckled, and embraced by the Muslim community. If that's not a contradiction, then I don't know what is. And the fact that there is a war against the Muslim world, there is a war against Islam. There are forces at play. Where they say we don't fight against flesh and blood, we fight against principalities and spiritual wickedness in high places. Like there is a war against the Muslim world. There is a war against Islam. There are some people, many people. I'm not saying the kuffar because there's lots of different types of people who are not Muslims. Some potential allies, some people who are indifferent, some people who are open to learning, some people who today maybe not Muslim but tomorrow maybe Muslim. So Allah knows best. So I don't want to put no lump of the kuffar, but there are people who directly hate Islam, and it was like the ex-Muslim club, if I can put it that way, is like they couldn't believe their luck. I mean, they was given a platform on, I think it was ITV or something like that, but it's a real mainstream program. When I was watching breakfast TV, as I do in the morning, getting up, getting myself together, I saw, I think it was a producer of the program, somebody that's heavily involved in that support group. But I just think it's stupid. There's a phrase they use in America now, attention whoring. Like, people just, shaking their rattle in front of the pram. But, someone just wants to be, see me, notice me. So to me, it was silly. It was just silly, and it didn't really make any sense. But I mean, what can you do? As I said to you before, on a psychological level, it seems like if you probably got a chance to screen those people, you might find evidence of like family issues. You know what I'm saying? Because some people are like, I've heard of young people saying things like this. Like my dad's getting me pressuring me to get married, and if he doesn't stop pressuring me, I'm gonna leave Islam. And it's kind of weird things like that, like. You're Muslim because you're a Muslim, or like you leave Muslims, like you leave in Islam, should I say, it's like you spy it in your family or kind of protest. So man, we're living in some interesting times. But the other thing as well, there's lots of people who they may not be formally Muslims anymore. Not say they're not formally Muslims. What do I mean? Like there's people who they probably don't really follow the creed. They're not practicing. Just go their way, just live their life. Whether they drink, Allah knows best what they do, and that's their business. But these people want to actually make a political, or a spiritual, a religious statement and say, I do not accept the creed. I formally want to renounce. Not informally, let someone just drift off and just do their own thing and live how they live. But they want to formally denounce the creed and be accepted. That's the most preposterous idea that you're going to get. But I believe there are questions in the background being formulated as I speak. So I'm open to comments and I'm open to questions.
Brother, thank you for an enlightening and interesting summary of the position. I only saw a brief part of the show.
That means you saw the whole show. It was very brief. The message was one-dimensional, one-tracked and brief.
But how far do you say this cultural thing goes? Is it purely cultural? Is the part of the way that Islam is presented? Is there a message within the way Islam is presented that's a problem? Or do you think it's purely a cultural thing of local mores and traditions? Or do you think there is something distorted within Islam or the message itself that is pushing them away? Assuming they're rational people.
Assuming they're rational people, I'm sure there would be many rational people amongst them, even though they're taking a preposterous position. I think they're actually allowing, as a side note, I think they're allowing themselves to be used by, like I said, malevolent forces that have an agenda, and they are sort of becoming allies to these people and being sucked in. But as that may be, put that by the by, I think that in a lot of sections of the Muslim community, there are some puritanical practices. There are some absence of empathy and some really, imagine teaching children the Quran and hitting them with a stick if they get it wrong. So if you think about how psychology works, like Pavlov and negative, like association, classical conditioning and operant conditioning. Imagine how that works. So you're associating the Quran with pain and stuff like that. So you shouldn't, if children don't want to pray, you shouldn't beat them, or things like this. You can't do that because it gives them a negative. They get a negative association with the religion. So I actually think that there's something that is an element. I'm not saying that's the whole story. I can't speak for all those people's individual stories, but I think there's aspects of that which creates problems. The way that Islam is passed on or taught, or how Muslim families deal with a young girl in a family who doesn't want to wear hijab. And if the family is encouraging her because they say, for Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, it will be more pure for you to adopt this form of modesty, and they have patience with their daughter. It's different from if they say, I feel embarrassed, and how am I going to look in the eyes of the community? What the people are speaking about me, people are looking at me funny, so I'm gonna whoop you. So you're not doing it for Allah, you're not doing it for the religious reasons, or not even trying to educate her. You just want to impose something on her. She doesn't understand it. That's an easy way to build up resentment. So you're going to probably find an imbalance between men and women who join this. Don't be surprised if the number of women outnumber the men. If it's just on gender line, because of the kind of puritanical or the oppressive or encroaching way that sometimes Islam is passed from one generation to the next. Well, maybe not Islam, but Muslimness.
The bit I saw, there was a girl. It presented a girl and her particular issues. And I wondered whether the issue was one of a patriarchal society, whether Islam is presented in a patriarchal way, the man dominating the woman, of girls being married off at 9 years old. If these are the messages that are getting out there, these distorted, false messages, of course, that are affecting these vulnerable people.
Yes, definitely the patriarchal side of things is going to be, as I said, that's why I mentioned a bit about the imbalance with the women, because things like that are going to have an impact whether you like it or not. And sometimes we do ourselves a disservice as Muslims in the community when instead of addressing things of this nature head on, we go, that's not Islam. It doesn't help the situation. It doesn't help. The actual negative fallout is going to still take place, but you're just finding solace in a place of saying it's not Islam. It's almost like saying, so lynchings existed in North America. Like people being lynched, burned, disenfranchised economically, politically, socially, on all aspects. And then you say, there's only one right. It's the human right. Yeah, it sounds good, but it doesn't help. Tell us that to Stephen Lawrence. It don't make no difference. So tell it to them sisters who didn't want to wear hijab when somebody's chasing them to throw paraffin on them and set them alight or something like that, or because they didn't, want to marry this particular person on the killings and stuff like that. It doesn't help them to say it's not Islam. She's still dead.
Very good. Can I ask yes, Assalamu alaikum, brother.
Alaikum salam.
MashaAllah, once again, I found what you said very enlightening and very educational, and it's something that I will try and resonate with me for a long time, I think, because it was very profound what you're saying. Sure. If I could just maybe push you a bit on an Islamic topic point. In the Quran, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala talks about, if you those who apostate against Islam, if they are found guilty of this act, that the death sentence is usually administered in this regard. Can you explain what the actual meaning in the Quran? Not that I'm saying you're Vijaza.
I'm no mufti. I'm no grand mufti
of the highest caliber. But in what context does it mean if somebody who is found an apostating and apparently be put to death? What does that actually mean in the context in terms of this film and what your little understanding of that is?
Interesting. My little understanding is contextual, so I'm not speaking for anybody. It's just my insights that I've gained, but I'm not putting it out there for people to say, oh, are given a decree. I'm just,
Or fatwa,
I'm just saying,
or
yeah, or
nothing.
fatwa or anything like that. I'm just speaking and sharing my reflections publicly. What I understand is at the time of the Prophet, peace and blessings be upon him, there were people who pronounced Islam, sought refuge with the Muslims, and then at a certain juncture in history, a certain juncture in that time when there was tensions between the non-Muslims of that region and the Muslims, that they would go and side, you know, so almost like taking inside information. They were like a fifth column, so almost like the Munafiqun, like, you know, kind of apostasy. It was like a hypocrisy, you know, like they were being on the side of the Muslims, and they weren't just leaving and being neutral. It was a kind of leaving and then siding with the enemy. So in that sense, people who openly apostated and then went and joined the enemy, then, you know, if that was that was treacherous. That's how I understood it. So that death sentence means like for traitors. But in 21st century, in a democratic society, human rights laws, not saying we're going by the democratic laws, but in the type of society that we have with law and order and governance and, you know, safety and a certain level of justice system and things of this nature, if somebody from Bradford or wherever in, say, the UK, they come up in a Muslim family, they don't want to be a Muslim, that's heartbreaking emotionally for the family. But the need to find some sort of death squad, we got to get them. I don't really understand that kind of aspect of it. I don't see that the Quran's talking about that. Like, Islam's beggy. We're desperate for people to the point where if you know, it's like the mafia. You can't leave this thing alive. Like, I don't know about that kind of thing. I've heard lectures about it. If a person doesn't pray for 3 days, I've heard some quote unquote scholars say that the ruling is that they should be killed. I mean, Allah doesn't need us to pray to him, innit? We're praying for our benefit. So I don't really. I'm not clear about why you want to kill a man if he don't make salah. That's his business, isn't it? Allah says he's the judge. I haven't seen an ayat that says, you know, if they don't pray, then behead them. You know, so I don't know where that comes from. But I'm linking them, kind of conflating two issues. But it's that kind of idea of maybe taking something in a particular context. So I do think that rule, I still would agree that the ayat is active. That if there are people who, they're part of the Muslim community, we're in tension, and then they're leaving the Muslim community, and they're trying to, I don't know, take ideas of the infrastructure of the Muslim community and put people's life at jeopardy and things like that, then that'd be a different than the ayat. I mean, the ulamas have spoken, innit? Those who know tafsir and know the hukum, then they've spoken on that. I don't have a problem with that. But just a kid who, you know, is kind of into Xbox, you know, in his room and smoking a bit of skunk weed, he's just not into this Islam and praying thing. I mean, stuff for Allah to be late, but that's his business, isn't it? Allah's gonna judge him. He's, you know, I don't have to like him either, because that's just another, you know, side of the story. So, you know, although he's not a Muslim now, why shouldn't I hug him and still be friends? Why is he being disregarded by them? I don't really got no time for him necessarily, you know, and that's cool. So I'm in the middle. You know what I mean? I don't want him to be beheaded, but we and him ain't cool no more if he's gonna denounce the message of Allah and denounce the word of Allah. I mean, we ain't really cool. We're not cool, man. You know.
So would you say that, okay, so correct me if I'm wrong, so you're saying like if when that verse was revealed in the time of Muhammad, peace be upon him, and his pure uncleansed family, it related to those who made war against the Islamic State, those who apostated not just in their heart but also in their action, by actually taking up sides with the Prophet, peace be upon him, learning vital information, trying to even kill the Prophet where his whereabouts would be, and revealing that information. And then they would actually, when you see them again, they'd actually have a sword and a weapon, and they'd be coming to kill you and fight you after you've given them succor, after you've shown them love and respect, and brought them into the fold of the Deen. So this is a time of war. This verse is talking about people who make war. It might not necessarily mean it means to every rank and file situation now, as you said, but it is situational. So is it very similar to the other verse in the Quran when Allah says, when you find the disbelievers, kill them wherever you find them? Would that be similar to sort of like in the, say, Japan in the 40s, if President Roosevelt said, if you find a Japanese soldier, when you invade the islands, kill him wherever you find him, kill any Japanese soldier or any Japanese person you find, kill them at that time. And we know in America they put Japanese people in internment camps. Yeah. And this of it. So, but it doesn't mean, so that law, if it says, for example, all Japanese people have to be in internment camps in 1942, it doesn't mean now, it means that you do it now to them, And is that what you're saying? And similarly, if you say find disbelief wherever you find him, it doesn't mean in that time for that particular war that it meant you find them, and if they make war against you, then you kill them according to an eye for an eye. To the level they've hurt you, you hurt them back. Am I correct in that or
that
not?
that is what I've learned from the scholars. That's how I've been taught. That verse doesn't mean random. But I mean, if you listen to LBC radio, BBC radio, things of this nature, they love that ayah because they're antagonistic Islam. So doesn't the Quran teach this? But they never give you a context. They never give you a historical backdrop. They never give you the ayats that balance it out to say there's no compulsion in religion and things of this nature, and that the fact that there are churches throughout the Middle East and synagogues and places of worship, and the Quran teaches us and Islam teaches us that we're not supposed to damage them places, and if we come into, as Muslims, if we come into control of an area that the people pay the jizya, then they have rights under the law. They have rights within that. They are in that civil society, not a war, in that society of war, but in that civil society, they have rights. There's rules to this thing, and it's not a free for all. And a bloodbath of the people who don't embrace Islam. There's nothing that will suggest that in the history of Islam that was the case. But people that like to misrepresent Islam, sometimes who are claiming to be Muslim, or sometimes those who are just outsiders and they're just antagonists, like to try and give that kind of interpretation, kill them. What kind of religion is that? A religion of peace, and everybody that's not a Muslim. So that will come in. If you wherever you find a disbelief, it means a person, you're out in your whites with a table, Quran, Bible, talking about, God is one, looking at the Bible, blah, and a person comes up and you Muslim, sir? No, I'm not Muslim, I just come to find out what you're saying. Would you look to see if the CCTV is looking to see if we can, do him in or something like that? I mean, it's kind of stupid, isn't it? Where does the intellectual discourse and debate come from? The Quran tells you to speak with them, isn't it, in the best language and with better argumentation, with more sharper knowledge and hikmah, to impress upon them this truth. So then how does that sit with wherever you find him, kill him? So everything's out of context. So people taking these verses out of context. So I think it's a very important question. It was a question that you phrased, but you raised very important points, because you have to take them into, you have to balance these ayats out. These are the signs of God Almighty, the final revelation to mankind. It's not a joke, but people pick them up and want to start teaching willy-nilly and mislead the people, and it's very dangerous, spiritual. It's very, and also on a social level, it doesn't create a good harmonious environment for society of people who are supposed to be responsible people in the media, the mainstream media, for example, creating an impression in the general public's mind that Muslims want to kill all non-Muslims, and this is what all non-Muslims believe, and they want to kill the infidel, and they want to kill those who are apostate, who don't want to be a Muslim anymore, and then we're going to live in a cohesive society. They kind of drip, doing us like how the Jews were done in Nazi Germany, in a similar methodology, kind of polluting the public's mind about Islam and Muslims, and at the same time they're being surprised at the rise in this Brexit attitude and this anti-immigration attitude, and then the anti-Muslim sentiments and anti-Islamic sentiments in the society. So it's crazy. We live in serious times.
One more question to ask you, though. Sam's got any more, but you did touch slightly on the psychological rationale behind where someone would not just say, okay, I don't want the membership for that club anymore, for example, and I'll just quietly not be part of it. Or I don't want to be part of the Conservative Party anymore. I want to join Labour now. Why is it not? Why is somebody who allegedly leaves Islam? What do you think? What is the machination behind someone who would do that, and then perhaps, as you say, go on gold and push themselves on, and they look at me now, I'm out, and look at me, but I want you now to acknowledge me being out and give me equal status with you. That I'm out now. And as you were saying, in Islam everything has a status. So Muslim Milli, Muslim Fitri, so everybody has. Islam gives a status to every category of person, yes, right?
Yes.
So how would the apostate have a category? What category would that be? And is it, you touched on isn't that a form of traitorism in the way that you said that we are at war with Muslims, right? And there's all this heightened tension about Muslims. What would go on in somebody's mind to know that that's the case? Because if they would have been a Muslim at one point, experiencing that, and then to come out and then to so-called say I'm not Muslim anymore, but then add to that, create more of tension around Muslims, as you talked about Muslims in Nazi Germany. To add more to that fire, to add more to that hatred, to add more, ratchet up more. Like, instead of just silently saying I'm not Muslim anymore, but in a way, if I'm right what you're saying, as if they're actually adding to the fuel to the fire by their so-called apostasy. That it's almost a badge to, almost a form of Nazism. Maybe that's not the right word for it, but joining the side of the ones who are trying to, as you said, put Muslims in this very difficult predicament. What do you think will be the motivation, the motivation of such a person on a psychological level? Self-hatred, maybe, self-vilification.
Yeah, self-deprecation is definitely one of those things, and I actually think it's interesting because there's some people who they leave Islam, and they may join another spiritual path. So they refer to themselves, for example, as a Buddhist, as a Christian, as Shintoist, or whatever it is or they've identified with a political ideology. I'm not really into religion anymore. I'm really into the communist thing. I think Marx was spot on, right? With this whole materialistic dialectical school of thought. That's their business, right? But they're identifying with something different. But to actually even think of the psychology, think of it in neurolinguistic terms. The non-Muslim, the ex-Muslim. So you still got the word Muslim in there. The ex-Muslim part. So it's like, to me, that's to show me of evidence of people in turmoil. They're struggling to form an identity. To, as they say, go about your business. If you're going to leave, bye. Khalas, we're done. Yeah, cool. But you still kind of, there's a link there. So if you see the program in there, there was I was going to say a sister. There was a woman, a young lady in the program who, she's no longer a Muslim, but to protect her family, she is disguising herself. But she's got a hijab on. She could have had a hoodie on. She could have had a hat. You could have just darkened out her face, but she was still wearing a hijab. So it's like there's this kind of cultural affiliation and this emotional affiliation with Islam and Muslim peoples. But so it's like turmoil. They're in people in torment more than anything else. But I think they're being used. I think they're naive and they're attention seekers. And sometimes if, like a young girl who didn't get the love from her father and she runs away from up north and comes to London to sort of seek her fame or whatever, and then you have a pimp that uses, yay man, and sits down and buys her a coffee and then grooms her because he's got another plan in mind to use for his agenda, and then she's susceptible and falls into a situation where, or she's basically used. And I think that's how the media or other political entities operate. You know what I'm saying? It's like you coming out and saying, I used to be, like, that's a gold card. It's like, this is a way to attack the religious. So there's people that would give that a name. And these people probably didn't get the attention they wanted from their families, or they're a little bit sore, if I could use that word, emotionally sore about whatever, what goes on in families and in communities and stuff like that. And there's psychosocial issues. Probably not, because one of the program was, I watched the program, I tried to watch it, it was kind of, I found it garbage. It was, but on a level of intellectual or spiritual or theological, or philosophical, there was nothing there. But just on like a level of human and psychological, then it had its intrigue, because it was just like these people it's a subtext. There's one thing I'm saying, that's the message, but underneath that, you look a little bit underneath that, as you say, on a subconscious level or on a, what's it called, transactional analysis kind of level. There was, the analysis would have been different about what, the inner child, so the adults talking and saying, I'm leaving is, but the inner child was like, Daddy was a bit harsh. He used to force us to go to the mosque, and there's a subtext. So that's how I see it, really, just people that are being manipulated. So I mean, essentially that's it. I mean, it's probably online. You can check it out, but more importantly, check out more of our videos. Continue to subscribe, whether it's on the left or whether it's on the right, or is that my right and your left? But wherever it is, hit that button and leave a comment. And to all the people in the ATL around the world, the different comments that we get from even as far as the Far East, and the feedback, continue with the feedback. Hit us with an email of what you think if you want to leave the information on the comment section. But it's been a pleasure. Until I see you next time, remember to stay safe. Assalamu alaikum rahmatullahi ta'ala wa barakatuh.